Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to be talking about climate change and how it's impacting us not only worldwide, but in our own communities and on the streets where we live. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Mike Tidwell is a journalist, author, and climate activist living in Takoma Park, Maryland. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, from 1985 to 87, where he taught fish farming in the village of Kalambayi. His most recent book is a detailed examination of the dramatic impacts of global warming in his own front yard, called The Lost Trees of Willow Avenue, A Story of Climate and Hope on One American Street. Mike is a passionate conservationist, and he founded the Chesapeake Climate Action Network in 2002. Mike Tidwell, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being with me today. Let's go back a few years when you were a Peace Corps volunteer. And what motivated you to join the Peace Corps? And talk a little bit about your project.
I wanted to travel, honestly, more than do anything, philanthropic. I wanted to travel and see the world, and I was really drawn to sub-Saharan Africa. I requested sub-Saharan Africa as my posting, and I got it, and it changed my life completely. I did manage during the 2 years to help a few village farmers raise some fish, fisheries volunteer, improve their lives, at least in terms of more protein for their families. But I got so much more out of the 2-year experience than I think the people that I helped. It was a transformative experience that has shaped my life ever since.
I agree with you. I was in the Peace Corps in the Dominican Republic, and I think I did a little bit of good there, but I've gained a tremendous amount out of it, and certainly brought the third goal of Peace Corps, to bring the message home, to bring the experience home. And you have certainly done that as in dealing with your recent activities, for sure. But before we leave Africa, let me ask you, what type of cultural challenges did you run into, or any other, whether folkways or mores that were somewhat strange to you at that time?
What challenges did I not run into? Everything from learning to eat insects to the language, of course, was very, very challenging. I was committing social faux pas the last day I left. There were still things I was learning on the very last day, but I did learn so much, and you begin to understand yourself better as an American by living among non-Americans. There was no one within 100 miles of me who spoke English. And so I got really, really good at speaking the local language, Chuluba. I also had to speak French to local government officials. Between the language, the food, the friendships, I learned a lot. I overcame a lot of challenges, and I tell people I learned more in 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer than 4 years of undergraduate studies and grad school in college in the United States.
It is a life-changing experience, no doubt about it, and it put all of us on the road to international activities to some degree, I'm sure. Well, let's focus on your recent book, and the Lost Trees of Willow Avenue, A Story of Climate and Hope on One American Street. What is the thrust of this book?
This book began when I began noticing that the biggest oak trees in my neighborhood, Takoma Park, Maryland, the 7100 block of Willow Avenue, right on the border with Washington, D.C., when the big oak trees in my neighborhood began to die in really large numbers, starting in 2019. I was already a climate activist. I founded the Chesapeake Climate Action Network in 2002. I spent 20 years advocating for clean energy solutions to global warming at the state level in Maryland, Virginia, DC, and on Capitol Hill. But I became discouraged when I realized that climate change was now so bad worldwide that you could actually see it in your front yard. And I could see it in my front yard in the form of really big oak trees dying. And it wasn't me saying it was climate change killing these trees. It was the city arborist, it was the public works department, it was the tree experts who came weekly to take down these massive trees in my neighborhood. On my one block of 14 houses, again, right on the border with DC and Maryland, we lost 500 years worth of tree growth in the form of big trees since 2019. So that's 150-year-old southern red oak, 100-year-old white oak, 150-year-old willow oak, and an 80-year-old willow oak that all died because of extreme weather linked to climate change. And so I thought that maybe I could tell the story of climate change through the trees on my block. And I wound up not only telling the story of trees, but also the other impacts of climate change in my neighborhood. The number of people who have Lyme disease in my neighborhood, and I manage chronic Lyme for the last 15 years, but 3 other members, people on my block have Lyme. 6 members in my church a block away have battled Lyme. An Eagle Scout in the local Boy Scout troop was bedridden for 2 years from Lyme disease because the winters don't kill off ticks at nearly the level they used to because our winters are milder. Also flooding, all these different impacts of climate change in this one microcosm. So my point in the book was to show that climate change has gotten so bad that you could take a spinning lacquered globe and throw a dart at it today, and wherever that dart lands, whether it's Southern Africa or Japan or Takoma Park, Maryland, where I live, you could write a whole book about that one microdot. And the reason I know that is now I've done it.
Yes. In your book, you reference cascading impacts. Is that what you were talking about just a moment ago, talking about how it's interrelated? It's not just the temperature is going up or just that the oceans are getting warmer or the ice caps are melting, but it's all interlinked.
Yeah, and also by cascading impacts, I mean that as big trees die on my neighborhood, they make the flooding problem even worse. The reason the opening chapter of my book explains how this mass mortality of oak trees happened in the mid-Atlantic starting in 2019. It started with record rainfall in 2018. Just every state in the mid-Atlantic in 2018 shattered annual rain records by a long shot. Maryland got 2.5 feet more rain during the year 2018 than normal. That soaking of the soil, that drenching water in the soil triggered across the mid-Atlantic a mold called Phytophthora, which translates from Greek to plant destroyer. And this mold just devastated the fine root tips, especially of old oak trees. Oak trees are like people. When they're young, they could take more punches. When they get older, not so much. The roots of these trees were devastated by this mold. It stressed the trees out so much when they leafed out in 2019. They were so stressed and vulnerable to beetles that ambrosia beetles then attacked and just killed thousands of trees in my neighborhood. My neighborhood alone, Tacoma Park, Maryland, we've lost 45 acres of tree canopy just since 2018. And an arborist told me, Mike, our native trees in the mid-Atlantic are no longer native. We've changed the climate, and so they're foreigners now. So we shouldn't be surprised that they're getting sick and dying. And if our trees are foreigners, then what does that make us as human beings all over the world? We're all now foreigners on a changed planet, and we might want to do something about that.
We certainly have to, and we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg right now, no pun intended, but this is just the beginning of, or these are the beginning effects of the climate crisis, really. And we'll be back in just a moment to talk about them. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station or an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you have a podcast, or you just have a computer, you like our shows and you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're taking a look at the climate crisis and how it is interlinked with so many different activities in our society and in our culture, and how it resonates right in our own neighborhoods. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Mike Tidwell is a journalist, author, and climate activist living in Takoma Park, Maryland. He formerly was a Peace Corps volunteer in Zaire. Mike's most recent book is titled The Lost Trees of Willow Avenue, A Story of Climate and Hope on One American Street. Mike, we're talking about this climate crisis, and a lot of people say, well, this is sort of cyclical. This happens, things will return to normal. But really, for things, first off, the climate scientists who have done the studies say it's going to get a lot worse. This is not going to get better. And to how many eons would it take to get back to where we were, especially as our ice caps melt, our trees die, we have desertification, and on across the board. What did you do as far as trying to remedy this situation from the educational standpoint or from the hands-on standpoint to help people realize that this was truly a crisis and we needed to do something quickly?
Well, it is a crisis. Our scientists tell us that the only safe level of carbon in the atmosphere is 350 parts per million carbon in the atmosphere. Anything higher than that, and the planet starts to overheat. We are today at 425 parts per million carbon in the atmosphere. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing runaway warming. We're seeing global warming so profound that you can actually see it at the street level, which is why I wrote my book, The Lost Trees of Willow Avenue, to document that fact. Again, trees dying, flooding, chronic flooding in my neighborhood, and Lyme disease and other impacts. But I also chronicle how when really big trees pass away in my neighborhood, one of two things tend to happen. Either solar panels are put on a roof, because suddenly you have this very sunny roof, residential roof or flat commercial roof, and a lot of solar is put on roofs after trees pass away in my neighborhood, or gardens happen. People start to grow their own food as a way to sustainably produce food closer to home, which is what we're going to need to do with climate change. So those things are happening, but also in my neighborhood, again, at the same time that we've seen the passing of trees from extreme weather, we've seen the general coming of clean energy, and not just solar, but electric cars. I live in a pretty progressive neighborhood, but still all over America, wherever you go these days, you can pretty much hear that, what my neighbor Paula calls the faint harmony of angels, that sound of an electric car coming down the street. And in my neighborhood, there's so many electric cars that we have the first gas station in America that switched entirely from pumping gas to charging electric cars. RS Automotive in Takoma Park. If you're ever in Takoma Park, Maryland, and you have an electric car, get charged there. So these positive things are happening. And also because of advocacy all over the world, every day on this planet, it can seem dire. We're seeing profound impacts from Arctic ice melt to sea level rise, on. And then we see an administration in Washington that is dismantling the EPA, attacking the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, etc. It's easy to think we're doomed. There's no hope. But the reality is, and I point this out in my book, is that every day on this planet, human beings deploy a gigawatt of solar energy every day. A gigawatt, that's the equivalent of a massive nuclear power plant of solar energy day after day after day around the world. So solar is spreading like crazy, and there's nothing the administration in Washington can do about that. Half the cars sold in the largest automobile market in the world this year, which is China, half of all new cars will be electric cars this year. Australia will be close to 100% carbon-free electricity grid nationwide in a country known previously for coal production. So these are positive trends that are happening, but we have to keep going because, again, we're in overshoot. 350 parts per million carbon is the only level that's safe, and we're at 425. We have to also, scientists say, achieve what's called negative emissions. We have to figure out how to draw carbon out of the air and store it in the ground. And I do address that in the book as well.
It sounds like you're in a very progressive community, to put it mildly. And you mentioned so many things that I'd like to follow up on, but we won't have time. But one, that Australia is moving in the direction it's moving is just remarkable because they've had such intense pressure to stay with coal. And of course, we're experiencing that to some degree, to a large degree, in the United States. But you also mentioned China. China is going to be the #1 car producer of clean energy cars. It looks like at the rate they're going, because we're trying to not help our industry, but they're not doing that. They're moving in the opposite direction, as are a large number of countries around the world. They're moving on without us. It's going to be America alone dealing with this. And you can see from the destruction of some of the EPA regulations, we're going to have polluted waterways. We're going to have filthy air. We're going to have illnesses affecting children with just about everybody, respiratory illnesses. And it's a move in the opposite direction of where we need to go. But you have been so actively involved in this. And one thing you did, you established the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Now you're in the Chesapeake Bay area. What exactly is this action network? What does it do?
Well, yes, I formed Chesapeake Climate Action Network in 2002. I come from a print journalism background, but I became so alarmed by the science around climate change in the early 2000s that I made the switch to nonprofit advocacy and formed this group. Our mission is to bring clean energy solutions to global warming in the states of Maryland, Virginia, and DC. And we also work on Capitol Hill. So we promote offshore wind power in Virginia, for example, which in my book, The Lost Trees of Willow Avenue, there's a whole narrative where I go visit this offshore wind farm in Virginia that's amazing. It's being built as we speak by Dominion Energy. When it's completed, it will generate enough clean energy equivalent to taking 1 million cars off the road. And my nonprofit group helped advocate for that. In the District of Columbia, we advocate for building efficiency standards for all new buildings so that new buildings in the nation's capital have to be fully electric, no combustion. And you see that. I work on a 7th floor of an office building right on the border with DC, and I can look into DC and I see all these fully electric buildings with heat pumps on top, solar panels. They're amazing, and they emit no carbon. In Maryland, we've advocated for electric vehicles. We've advocated for mandated levels of solar deployment in the state. So these are some of the things we do at Chesapeake Climate Action Network. We also fight against fossil fuel development. We banned fracking in the state of Maryland. We stopped a major frack gas pipeline in West Virginia and Virginia called the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So we try to keep fossil fuels in the ground while promoting clean energy solutions to climate change using grassroots pressure, using lawsuits, using effective communications, and lobbying at the state legislatures.
There's a myth out there that so often people will say, well, if we get rid of the coal miners or we get rid of the frackers or what have you, that they'll be unemployed. But that's not true. The clean energy is creating, the last figure I saw was like 300,000 jobs a year just in solar or something like that. But that figure may be a little off. But anyway, the point is there are other jobs to have And if I were a coal miner, I'd be very appreciative to work in some place where I'm not going to get black lung, or perhaps have the roof of the cave fall in on me and be buried under 50 ton of coal. It just you have to think this thing through, and instead of a knee-jerk reaction. Well, let me ask you, with your book, what, well, we're just about out of time, unfortunately, but let me ask you, what would you like our viewers to take away from our discussion today and from your book as to what they can do to combat this climate crisis and to really help create a better world for everybody?
Yeah, I would say, if you can, buy a copy of the book, The Lost Trees of Willow Avenue by Mike Tidwell, or check out your library. It's in a lot of libraries. It really is a readable, narrative-driven account of one neighborhood, and a lot of amazing things happen, from people getting really sick with Lyme disease to people, you know, applying solar panels, not only on their roofs, but in their backyards, in ways that they can also grow pollinator-friendly flowers. It's just an amazing book of human triumph against challenges. But the number one thing I would say, it's also an alarming book. It's a sad book. There's a lot of scary stuff that's described in this book. And a lot of people say, Mike, look, climate change is bad. You've convinced me, you've alarmed me, you've depressed me with this description of how advanced climate change is. Tell me what to do about it, and don't give me 10 things to do. If there's just one thing I could do to help fight climate change, what would that be? Because I'm so busy. I got choir on Monday nights and the kids have to get to soccer on Thursdays. Tell me one thing I should do, the most important thing. And my answer is always the same. Develop a relationship with one group fighting climate change wherever you live. That could be the state chapter of the Sierra Club. That could be, there's a great faith organization called Interfaith Power and Light that has chapters all over the country. If you're in the DC region, Chesapeake Climate Action Network, my group, a quick Google search wherever you live will show a group fighting climate change and fighting for clean energy where you live. Develop a relationship with that group. Get on their email alert list. Make a donation if you can. We talk about individual choices, like turning the lights off, eating lower on the food chain, driving an electric car. These are all important individual choices. But the number one thing you can do to fight climate change is stop being an individual and join a group of people, join a movement to bring clean energy to this planet.
That sounds like an excellent suggestion. And I'm sure, now you've written several books, but I'm sure you have a lot of ideas for future books. But one, if you haven't considered it, maybe I could suggest it, is to do a book on Takoma Park as being a model clean energy city or area in this country. And there may be others around the country. I know you have bits and pieces in different cities and what have you, but it sounds like you're doing some remarkable work in Takoma Park, and it would certainly be to all of our best interest to learn about it. And I'm really fascinated by the gas station owner who decided to go clean energy all the way and get rid of the gasoline. So of course, we will not get rid of gasoline immediately. We know that it's just not going to happen. But anyway, well, Mike Tidwell, it's an extremely important topic. It's probably the most important topic that we're dealing with of all of the crises that we face every day. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.